This program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Watch Mojo and the Inside Podcast. I'm your host Rob, and with me as always is Watch Mojo CEO and co-founder Ashkan Karbas-Fushan. What's new, Ash? How's it going?
I like the as always. You're implying I have nowhere to go. Nobody will take me. I'm here.
No, it's a comfort thing. You're my wingman, or I'm your wingman rather in this endeavor.
Collective. It always depends on who you spot at a club, and then that determines who the wingman is. But that's for another topic and another day.
Well, I mean, you are Ash Hustler Flint today, so I guess there is some sort of connection there. I had to look up who Larry Flint is before this interview, but would you like to provide some context on that? We're talking about censorship today.
Yeah, so Larry Flint was a publisher. He published Hustler, which I won't lie, I never read, even though I did occasionally read Playboy for the articles or Penthouse for the letters.
Right. Educational purposes
only.
I
mean, I worked in a convenience store. We had a lot of magazines. Yes, and Hustler was wrapped, but that's not the point. Let's get back on track. So Larry Flint was, like Hugh Hefner and many other publishers, an OG. And Hustler was a bit more edgy, we'll say, than Playboy or Penthouse way back. This predates me even. And so he fought, however, in theory, like The People versus Larry Flint was a biographical movie about his journey. And he basically stood up in his mind for freedom of speech and expression versus censorship, which is, bring it all together, today's topic.
Yes, that's right. So, we're witnessing a little bit of a period in the media right now. We've had some, censorship, alleged censorship. Some people are calling it censorship of Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And what is Watch Mojo's position right now as a media company?
Well, let's tee it up a bit. That's like, again, because you're going to have some people going, why is Watch Mojo covering this? Yeah. So after we did the 20 episodes of Inside Mojo, where we looked at the history of YouTube through the Watch Mojo lens, we took a bit of a break to go to the drawing board. And we have a bunch of other podcasts coming up soon. And then I think when obviously the Charlie Kirk assassination happened and Jimmy Kimmel was preempted by Sinclair Nexstar, and Disney said, why don't you take a mini hiatus? We said, you know what, let's kind of start like season 2, we'll call it, of the Inside series. And so we can't talk about censorship today, which is definitely front and center in the media world, without us having discussed the state of America 2 weeks ago. And last week, talk about capitalism.
Right.
Because capitalism, we kind of concluded socialism's never worked. In theory, it sounds good. But the only places that actually have any, manifestations of socialism are actually capitalist economic systems. But that comes with society structures like democracy, or even forms of government like republics that lend themselves well to a system and society where you have freedom. So. And to be fair, our producer Yvonne last week, when a few viewers were like, why are you guys talking about capitalism? Even though to me, these are all related. He was like, hey, we should tackle censorship. And I was like, that's a great topic. Mm-hmm. So here we are today. Just want to tee it up for folks. So let's first define it, right? So censorship, and I'll read a few definitions. In the simplest form is the removal or restriction of any kind of expression, whether it's written, verbal, could even be images. In many parts, we've seen that. And the reality is it could be by the government. It could be by your employer. It could be by just an organization or group that applies pressure. It can even be self-censorship if you actually think about it. So that's censorship. And I think where a lot of people get very excited is where they kind of conflate who is doing the censoring. Like in America, you have the Constitution, a great document, inspired by Cyrus Cylinder, by the way. If you actually go back, Thomas Jefferson, the founding fathers were inspired directly by Cyrus, but also indirectly by Cyrus, because the French philosophers, the Enlightenment, Voltaire, Diderot, Rousseau, all those gentilshommes. So they had these like lofty ideals, and the fundamental freedom is the ability to speak. And for a guy like me who was born in Iran, granted, I grew up in the West, y'all take this for granted, but I also think respectfully, you guys are cuckoo bananas, because you really conflate, like as a society, not you, Rob, you guys conflate when the government steps in to say, not just we don't want you to say something, but we will punish you, which I think the Kimmel thing was lost in, there's a loss of fidelity.
There were other factors.
There were other factors. It was like, who was really doing the censoring? Versus an employer, if you, Rob, I like you, but if you go out there and you blame the blacks and the Jews and the Asians and the Muslims, I may reach out to you and go like, hey, if you want to explain this in a different way, I'm open to hearing, there's a proper way. I don't want to censor you. But if you're just going out there, then yeah, maybe don't put WatchMojo on your handle. Maybe do it under a different name. I would still be pretty chill. But I could say, hey, may not be... and I myself, as a guy that speaks his mind, do I censor myself? We could get back to that later. Versus just you censoring yourself. So I think, like America, everybody gets very excited. Everybody gets very agitated. So today it would be good to just kind of break this all down.
Right. And so why is this particularly important now in 2025? Why is it such a hot topic?
Well, the main reason why it's really, really pertinent is because you have an administration in the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, that is definitely leaning in and throwing its weight around. And I think it is very fair for Americans and international citizens as well to ask, at least, I think it's fair to ask, is this censorship? Possibly. Is it, however, an encroachment of the First Amendment? I don't really recall, and I don't take sides. I kind of like, I don't say I understand, but I hear people. Yeah, I don't think Donald Trump actually said that Jimmy Kimmel is going to go to the state pen. I don't think, I don't think Lindsey Graham, Lady G, came out and said, if Jimmy Kimmel continues saying what he does, we're going to put him on death row.
Right.
So it's paradoxical, but yeah, you could very well have some censorship going on. But if that automatically means it's an encroachment of the First Amendment, yeah, I think that's not really the case. It's not the same thing.
Right. And one of the conflations that people also make is that they think that freedom of speech equals freedom from consequences of what they say.
You've heard that quite a bit. Now, the paradox, what makes this incredible is a decade ago, 6-7 years ago even, America was like on the other axis, right? I mean, it was like if you were to come out and say certain things, you had, just to simplify it, the left coming out and canceling people so-called on the right for views that they deemed radical, even if, to be honest, probably a lot of America shared those views, but it's the difference between the vocal minority and the silent majority. Today, you're seeing, before a regression to the mean where there's some kind of healthy balance, which usually is a fleeting moment, you're seeing it push to the other end, where if somebody were to come out and go, hey, Charlie Kirk, even if I don't like, this isn't my comment to be clear, I don't like that he got shot in front of his family, but the guy was no angel. He was a hate monger, let's say. He said things that were appalling, and why are we naming, cities and streets after him? That guy's going to get canceled, so to speak, because they're like, you're condoning. So again, I think the beauty of the American Constitution and the greatness of America is that it is a pretty rigid system or set of systems. But I mean, especially in the era of social media, there was like a couple of weeks ago, cancel Disney because cancel Disney because of Kimmel. Mm-hmm. Even though Disney was just the producer, it was Nexstar and Sinclair, the distributors of those ABC channels, that said, we don't really want this show. So people were like, cancel Disney, and we'll see in their earnings report if that led to it. I mean, I think probably single-digit million people canceled. They'll probably half of those people sign up again. As we speak, people are calling for the cancellation of Netflix. because they're accusing Netflix of having a woke agenda and pushing transgenderism, and which again is the crazy shit about where America is, because a few years ago it was the right that was like freedom, live and let live. You would think they'd say, let there be shows on whatever, we just don't watch it. But now the right is looking to cancel the so-called left because there's a show, which you can agree or disagree. Like, do I want my 5-year-old to watch a show with a trans, let's say, character? That's a separate discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see the right now going after Netflix, and tomorrow they'll go after Paramount Plus because Paramount is this or that, it's just, you are seeing, like, this is why it's important in 2025, because consumers, they do have strength in numbers. And even if it doesn't really lead to the change that they want, like in parentheses, people are like, Starbucks is closing these stores because of the boycott, because of their support of Israel. We're pro-Gaza, let's say. I'm like, Starbucks is closing those stores because those stores are unionizing. Like, if you think it has anything to do with the Middle East, good for you. That's a fantasy. They just want to shut down the stores that are most likely to unionize and that they overextended. So there is a lot of conflation. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of noise. And you also learn to just let people do what they want. Like, if you want to cancel Netflix because of some show that there's a character you object to, I mean, you're not really that different than the very same thing you were bashing 7 years ago, right? So it's kind of like, am I on crazy pills? But here we are.
So taking a whole step back from this, do you think that censorship is more of a tool to protect society, or is it a tool for having tighter control of society?
No, it's obviously control. I mean, you could say that the theory is to protect, but who the F is you to tell me, it's like, do I really need George W. Bush or Donald Trump, government to tell me what is, these people have zero principles and they're hacks. As I've said, politics draws the absolute scum of the earth in general, and I don't care if anybody's offended there. Like, that's my opinion. So no, I don't think the kind of actual objective is to protect society. The purported objective is to protect society and this and that. But I mean, again, I'm not picking sides. I understand. If Iran had the Second Amendment, we would not have a bunch of Kiri clerical Neanderthals, dominating over 95% or 90% of the population that doesn't want anything to do with these barbarians, so to speak. Like, it's just, if this is a show on censorship, I'll speak my mind a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a denigrator of the Second Amendment. You see what's happening in the UK. You see what's happening in Canada. I'm totally anti-gun, anti-violence because of my nature. But I do think, though, that it is a way to control people. It is a way to intimidate people. But there is also the Streisand effect, that the second you go something is censored, look at freaking Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel was getting less than like a few 100,000 viewers, more on Trump. And I called him. I like parts of Trump, but he is an idiot. Like, he's not this like brilliant visionary. He's a fly off the seat off your pants, pussy grabbing like guy there. He's not like, we don't look up to him and go, what a great person. He's just a, very high stamina, high energy, despite his 300 years of age. But ultimately, it's totally backfired because Kimmel now is pertinent. Like, I never watched Kimmel, never cared about any of the late shows. I thought it was a lot of like, grandstanding and telling people how to live when they're all a bunch of freaking hypocrites, and like the most, in the industry that enabled the Bill Cosbys and the Harvey Weinsteins, like, these douches are going to tell America how to live. Like, I get why flyover states, not in a bad way, but like middle America hates Hollywood. But the Hollywood folks are just lost, and good for them. They think they rule the earth, and Silicon Valley thinks they rule the universe. But the point is, it backfires. If Donald Trump would have not said anything about Kimmel might have been like not renewed next year.
Yeah, but I think the same was true, back before Trump's second term, when he got kicked off of social media and stuff like that. That kind of lit a fire, and he might not have been reelected if it hadn't been for that. I mean, obviously, as an entrepreneur, when I look at the Zuckerbergs, when I look at the Larry Page and Sergey Brin's, when I look at the Steve Jobs, I'm a nobody. Like, these guys are like, in terms of entrepreneurship, they're in the Hall of Fame. I'm like the janitor there. So I'm not saying like that much I give them props, but these people have zero principle. They have zero character. They have real zero integrity. Like, they basically
bamboozled all of the world through low interest rates and stupid VCs and more idiotic pension funds just to throw money and fake it till they make it. And many of them built big businesses through vision and ambition. Like, I get that. But who the fuck are these people that then they're going to be the barometer of principles? So yes, you're 100% right. We're these morons who, instead of like actually having principles and saying, look, it's freedom of expression, it's freedom of speech, we're not going to deplatform him. If you guys, but obviously in the wake of January 6th, the insurrection, trying to take down the American institutions of this and that, they kind of reacted knee-jerk. And this is what these companies do. They react knee-jerk when work from home, hashtag DEI, hashtag rainbow. And then when it's fair weather, when it's like not in their interest, or when they don't want to deal with it, they're very quick to torpedo these things. So it's a bunch of like hollow, vapid people that I'm surprised that America looks up to. But to quote, I forgot his name, Scott Galloway, teacher at NYU, former entrepreneur, society looks up to people because of wealth, nothing really else, or fame. So we look to them. So when they deplatformed Trump, they basically gave him an easy hall pass, making it seem like, what was this Messiah saying? Like, what was he saying that was so dangerous and so provocative? He was saying kofefe, for fuck's sakes. You know what I mean?
I remember that one.
The F word is one of those 7 or 9 words you're not supposed to say. We'll see how many we say in the show, maybe just for effect. But the point is, yes, the Streisand effect works. And Trump would not be back if the stupid-ass Republicans would have impeached him. But they also saw the long game. They were like, even if this guy is a pussy-grabbing, alleged crook and off-bankrupted, loser, the biggest loser, he has gravitational pull. He has charisma, as my late mother-in-law would say. And, we want him on our side. And so they did the deal with the devil. And these platforms, the craziest thing is one by one, and I shouldn't, again, self-censorship. YouTube, that under the late Susan Wojcicki, and I don't want to speak ill of anybody. I mean, I respected Susan. I thought she was a pretty good executive given the challenging years of YouTube going through explosive growth. I did send her a lot of critical messages, but I never publicly lambasted her because I understood that they had but I mean, they kind of, during COVID, censored effectively channels that disagreed.
Yeah.
And I was not an anti-vax or anything. I was like, I want to get on a plane, I'll vax. I don't care. I was like, the shit I put in my body, what's a vaccine going to do, right? But I mean, YouTube and many others did all that. They deplatformed Trump. And because Trump comes down like a bull in a china shop and is threatening everybody with lawsuits, these guys who have more lawyers than your average law firm are all being pussies, if you're going to be honest. And they're basically writing checks. Google, I mean, I hope Google doesn't cancel us there. I love you, Neil Mohan, and I think you acted pragmatically, so props. They paid Trump $24.5 million.
Yeah.
It's shocking. It's absurd. It's insane. But they did it because they were like, we'd rather pay $25 million than have to deal, not just with the litigation, but just being in Trump's crosshair.
Yeah.
So that's where censorship, or it's a tool, it's like, it's intimidation, and they all did. Freaking Paramount was looking to merge with Skydance. Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison, his company Skydance wanted to acquire Paramount. So they basically sacrificed Colbert. Now you could say he was losing money. Who gives a fuck? I mean, it's not the money. It was just like, hey, dear Trump, our supreme leader, here is Stephen Colbert. We give him to you and you could eat him for lunch. So you leave us alone, right? So it shows how all of this is bullshit. It shows how it's all kind of a fugazi, because you cannot tell me that the same board of directors who had to approve that payment, the same board of hollow directors that these companies have that 6 years ago were like, yeah, deplatform Trump. It's a matter of principles. These same fuckers today are like, where do we sign a check? Bend over so I write it first. Let me sign it. So it's kind of like you see people's true colors, So and I also don't want to. Sorry, go on.
It seems like you're implying that there's an economic foundation for most of these decisions, and then there's kind of like the veneer of like caring about the social aspects behind it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is everything is a casualty of war for something else, right? So if like YouTube and Google are being like hounded by the FTC or the ABC or the XYZ, some federal agency that's looking to give them a colonoscopy, yeah, they're going to have a sacrificial lamb, and they're going to be like, you know what? We're losing a battle to win the war. And freedom of expression, you could argue, is the casualty of war. But to call that censorship is one thing. It's a business decision. And to call it an encroachment of freedom of rights, I think that's when it's probably not that. Because again, Trump wasn't telling Kimmel to drop the soap. He was just saying, I recommend that you take this loser off the air.
Mm-hmm. What other historical examples can we draw from that might provide context as well?
Well, there's been a lot. I mean, look, there's a whole cornucopia of articles, but like I'll just enumerate some. Books have been banned, whether it's Mein Kampf or To Kill Them. I mean, books have been banned throughout the history of publishing. Comics, radio. We talked about the 7 words you can't say on TV or radio. Music, and also remember the rating system. PG-13, R-rated, parental advisory, a lot of rappers, I love rap, but a lot of rappers basically made coin because they have stupid governments slapped a parental advisory. And if I'm at Tower Records as a 12-year-old going through whatever, and I see something that's forbidden fruit,
that's the one I want, baby.
Yeah. So this has always happened, but I think fundamentally, again, the comment I made earlier about the Second Amendment was the government's not stopping little Joey from getting a gun and going to shoot people. They just offer prayers and thoughts. So this notion that anything is to protect consumers is bullshit. It's pure bullshit. And I mean, just look at the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. I'm not channeling Kennedy, the health guy there. But I mean, you're not going to tell me that the government's priority is the well-being of Americans. It's not, right? So censorship, it was for partly control, but I also think it's for chaos prevention. If like you got just stupid example, if you got like Radio Israel and they're like Muslims are terrorists, and you got Allahu Akbar Radio and they're like the Jews are these, genocidal people. Okay, well, at one point does it spill into actual violence and conflict? So I do believe that I understand, first of all, I'm a big freedom of expression guy. I both don't recommend people to go and draw Muhammad if you know that the Muslims are going to go crazy and not like that. But I also would never condone the fundamentalists that show up to Charlie Hebdo and kill a bunch of people,
Yeah.
Like totally. I'm not an extremist. I'm like a compromise and don't irritate your neighbor. But the point is, I mean, censorship is a man-made construct because I could say whatever I want, but it's naive to think, well, then people can't react to what I say,
Yeah, that's true. So we're living obviously in a digital age right now, and that brings with it a bunch of complications because we have these platforms like YouTube, TikTok, X, etc. And it's difficult to categorize them. Are they utilities? Are they private companies? Both are true in different contexts. How do we navigate the censorship question with regard to the social media companies that are so prevalent right now when it comes to disseminating information to people?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, practical. So you got to bear in mind that the internet is by nature global. It's kind of impossible really to police. Like you could police it, but you're just sending stuff to like the dark web, which means it's just there. So a lot of what we are seeing today is a result of, I think, the 1996 or 1997 Telecommunications Act. So the Telecommunications Act is important to those who actually want to make opinions about this stuff. Like if you don't know it, then shut up because you don't know why and things work. So the Telecommunications Act gave these 4 safe harbors to platforms that ultimately said if you want to be exempt from any liabilities because you're just a neutral platform, you're not a publisher, you're not a producer, you're just providing a platform, you're not vetting the content, both for copyright, but also for hate speech, then you have to do these things. And, there's so like the safe harbors that these platforms have because of the Telecommunications Act, it's kind of like the constitution of the internet, right? It's kind of like the rules of engagement. So in order for these platforms to be exempt from copyright infringement, piracy, hate speech, then their position is we are neutral. And they say we don't filter what really, even though they do now because of technology like Content ID.
Yeah.
And also, like, if I show my Johnson on a picture, I've been watching Curb, the Big Johnson Club. But if I upload my Johnson to the internet, yes, there's probably a filter. Thank God that will make sure that doesn't get published. But the point is, by and large, they're not sitting there looking at my Johnson, thankfully. They're just like, we're a platform. You're smiling. Don't get too excited now.
I'm imagining you like just splicing one frame of it in like Fight Club into a WatchMojo video.
Hey, good. Hey, man, that's Fight Club. That's the only rule of Fight Club. No, so that really set off everything. But now, as a parenthesis, in like a decade later, there was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And so the Digital Millennium Copyright Act clarified, it's like kind of the amendments to the Constitution, you could look at it. They kind of clarified a lot of things about copyright. But so the point is that these platforms have to project neutrality. They have to project blindness. If they say, well, we let, and I'm going to use purposely crazy examples, people like, just calm the fuck down. If they let the Muslim, like the pro-Gaza guy upload Israel is a genocidal state and they're no worse than the Nazis, let's say, then are they going to also let the Israeli, pro-Israeli, Israeli Chai guy be like, Muslim is a death cult and they're hate humanity and they're coming to rape your kids? Platforms don't want to deal with that. The entire ethos of Silicon Valley is, does it scale? They don't want to be there and sitting at content. So it's like also laziness to think like no disrespect to Mark Zuckerberg. Do you think Mark Zuckerberg cares about any of these matters? Do you think he even knows where Myanmar is? Even though like there was like a genocide in Myanmar because like they use Facebook. Like Mark Zuckerberg could care less, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. So the point is, these platforms have to act like they're neutral and they don't care, like they're blind, right? So why it's important, so that was like the preamble. But why it's really pertinent is that these are global platforms. Do you really think that Google wants 180 rules for 180 countries? No. So whereas when they start off, they take the most progressive, open-minded, loose definition of freedom of speech, say whatever the fuck you want, we don't care. Yes, because they don't want to deal with the headaches and they want to scale. They'll take all the content. Bill Cosby molesting child actor, it's all good. It's art. Harvey Weinstein molesting some actress, it's a job interview. We don't care, right? They don't care. Like to pretend they care, they don't. These people are worse than Hollywood in that sense. But as they get bigger, you have the EU that comes to big bad Google or YouTube and says, hey, on comprend que vous êtes en Californie, but we don't care. We here went through World War II. The Germans are like, you might think the Holocaust didn't happen. We saw it and it happened. Holocaust denial is illegal here. So the EU would tell YouTube, in Germany, but by virtue of us being in the EU, if you publish or let a user publish a video that says the Holocaust did not happen, it wasn't 6 million, it was 60 people, or even 600,000 people, or even 5 million people, we will sue you. Because according to our venue, our jurisdiction, that is illegal. So Google initially goes, F you, we don't care about the French, you're insignificant. But they could go to court, get a court-ordered injunction, ruling, whatever, and say, no, we're going to shut you down unless you prevent this. So then the lawyers at Google, who don't want the headache and don't want the hassle, they'll email the CEO and say, you know what? I know why we adopted a very loose definition of freedom of expression, but we should now go very narrow. And we should adopt the lowest common denominator So if we want one rule for the whole world, then you know what? Let's make Holocaust denial, using that example, illegal not just in the EU, but everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So if Jimmy in Pittsburgh wants to do a video on why the Jews are lying and the Holocaust didn't happen, if YouTube doesn't allow that, it's got nothing to do with freedom of expression. It's just a company's policy. And to their defense, they're allowed to. It's a private company. It's publicly traded, but it's a private company. They can do whatever the hell they want. So this is why it's important, because there is this mismatch of local laws, but we're also in this 247 cycle where if Elon Musk 2 days ago says can't cancel Netflix, then Netflix may at first not care, even if it's 1 million or 2 or 10. They have like 250 million subscribers. But if there's enough of a tornado brewing, then they will care. So it just goes to show that like the government is just a stakeholder, what we talked about in last week. It's just a stakeholder. You also have other vocal influencers, in this case, Elon Musk, who kind of come and almost nobody would accuse Elon Musk of censoring Netflix, right? That's the paradox, right? So it's really always kind of a personal or a organizational decision. But a lot of people are very quick to go with like First Amendment, which just shows they don't know what the First Amendment is.
Right. And that's one of the notes that I have here. It's that misconception that freedom of speech means freedom from consequences. And there's a misunderstanding about what the government's actual role is with regard to censorship. And, you know, I don't think we see a lot of that because we live in this digital age where all of the big companies are the ones being accused of censorship, but we don't really see it from at least in North America. And this goes back to what you were saying about us counting our blessings. You know, the United States, Canada is not like some other countries where the government does actively censor people. There's a lot more looseness over here.
Yeah, I mean, the number, if I had a nickel every time somebody called Justin Trudeau, pardon the language here again, log off like a cock, a gay, or as if that's anything bad. Like, it's surreal. In other countries, those people would have had their like heads cut off. Again, I was born in Iran. Iran like kills people. One guy, not even dissident, one just user, the supreme leader put out a tweet and he didn't put a period at the end of it. And this guy just replied with a period. They put him in jail. Like, so again, I do think that like there's not really a violation of the First Amendment per se, to be very clear, in terms of the government throwing Kimmel in jail.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't exist. But are there like an invisible hand, not so invisible hand in the back that encroaches on the freedom of expression? Yes. But Disney could have told Trump to go take a hike. I like Bob Iger. Like, he's a good individual. People seem to like him. But why would he, at his stage of his career, bend over to Trump? I know why, because there's other business decisions at stake. But it just goes to show these leaders are not principled people. They're very much, if not concerned with like quarterly shareholder results, they also don't want the headache. They don't want to take on Trump. Trump eats everybody and shits them out by 7 a.m. So my point was, is your beef really against Trump, who, as an individual, if he doesn't like what Kimmel's saying about him, he could try to get him intimidated. I would not act like that. I get people emailing me saying some random guy posted something on Glassdoor. Do you want us to release the hounds? I'm like, fuck it. Let everybody say what they want. We have a great culture. The morons that left and then went and said something stupid, I'm like, let them say that. It's their fucking loss. I'm like, let that record be there because I know who it is. I'm like, but cut from a different cloth. But the point I'm getting at is, why isn't Trump like, you have a colleague that talks shit about you, you probably don't like them. So I'm also like, Trump's allowed to be like that. Kimmel's a loser with no ratings. Shouldn't the people's sense of indignation be towards Sinclair, Nexstar, or Disney? Go hound them. And they did, to be fair. A lot of them did. And then they kind of, whether it was the cancellations, I don't think it was the cancellations. I think it was just, they were like, Kimmel's in his last year to do a lawsuit, protracted. They were less like, it's cleaner. Let's just sleep on it. kiss and make up for a year, and then nobody's watching late night anyway. We'll figure it out. They just punted the problem down by a year, and they canonized Kimmel. They made Kimmel into be like the next
that's true.
Jesus. It was like Jimmy freaking Kimmel is like Moses, Jesus, Mohammed,
definitely
and of course,
amplify him.
Kimmel, like a bunch of morons.
Maybe this is a good time to talk about censorship and WatchMojo. And do we censor ourselves? There's some interesting comments here.
Read a few.
Devin Bray says the free speech experts at WatchMojo, the channel that covers which celebrities had the worst deaths. So, among other things, I can think of worse videos we've done than that cover more touchy subject matter. But
if you're gonna roast us, use a good example. But the sentiment is fine. I mean, bring it on. So again, to the morons in the last aisle of the amphitheater, we've covered history, current affairs forever. But yes, if you're still in your basement eating a bag of Cheetos with a jar of Vaseline next to you, and all you care about is movies and gaming, I love you. I am that guy as well. Like, bring it on. I turn to WatchMojo for escapism. But we also have a lot of people that like these topics, so we cover it in our way. And you're listening. You don't have to. This is not North Korea, right? You chose to listen to this. So we actually do censor ourselves all the time. When during Me Too, we didn't put Bill Cosby on funniest sitcom dads. That's censorship. I never said don't put him. Not you. The team was like, it's not comfortable. I was like, well, he's still a funny sitcom character. You could put in the entry that his legacy was tarnished, but basically my esteemed team effectively censored me, and I said, this is not worth fighting. It's sensitive.
Right. But at the same time, is there a time and place to be more sensitive than...
Yes, but it's compromise, right? Like, life is all about compromises. So I always go, if something means more to somebody else than me, I'll let it go. To just get into a debate, like a dick swinging match, is not my management style. But I'm just saying that even with the people that are like the Jews control the media, first of all, like Rupert Murdoch's not Jewish. He, with Fox, took a slant because he saw a business opportunity. But let's say Rupert Murdoch was Chaim Shlomo Solomon, whatever. Do you really think his journalists are going to repeat his garbage? Like, if I came to you guys and said, we're going to do this and do that, half the company would be like, we're going to do the opposite just to spite the man. Not that we have that culture. So this is why people are stupid when they say these things, right? Like, people have agency. People have their own opinion. You think journalists listen to anybody? So that's moronic. The point I'm getting at is, yes, it's not coming from me. I would like it if we took more, bold risks, and not for clickbait, just to be a bit thought-provoking, not even provocative, because provocative for provocation's sake, I find, is not smart.
Right.
Like, it wears off, but thought-provoking is good. But my point is, organizations censor themselves. People censor themselves all the time. If I sat down at dinner and told my daughters everything that was on my mind, that wouldn't be a very constructive dinner, right? So I censor myself. You censor yourself. Yvonne censors himself to some extent. Companies do it all the time. It's because of survival. For some, it's economics, which is a bit of a parenthesis. In this YouTube economy, so to speak, the creator economy, we largely generate revenue because this invisible hand, Google, sells ads, and then they serve it where people are legitimately watching, comments, engaging, yada, yada. But all creator channels strive to build relationships with marketers. It's their experience. The second you start to talk to a marketer, you're actually censoring yourself. Because there's no way, pick any game that Mojo Plays covers. Like,
I don't know, Zelda.
Zelda. Who publishes that?
Nintendo.
If Zelda was a piece, not the original iconic, if Zelda 77 comes out and it's a piece of shit, you could say it's a piece of shit. I'm not even going to blink. But if you are going to write that article, but are like sales guys pitching to Nintendo, I assure you that won't work. This was the knock at IGN, I believe, the company that bought my old company, AskMen. IGN, I believe, got a lot of heat because they were like, well, your reviews are not really impartial because you're running ads for these very same companies. Mm-hmm. Now, there's always the so-called Chinese wall, church and state, bullshit. I assure you that right hand does sometimes step into the left hand and says, maybe you pull that. Right? So absolutely, there are decisions that people make. If right now I read the the guy that made Veep, he was complaining that he couldn't get funding or traction for his project, which was kind of breaking down, like fact-checking Trump, his speeches or whatever. I find that fascinating. But yes, I understand why no media company would want to touch that, because this is a drop in the bucket to everything else they got going on. That's not the government. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. It's not even the company censoring him. The companies are saying, yeah, we don't want this right now. That's their right, you know. So this is where I think if these people that feel they're being censored, there's actually a vacuum. Like Rumble made an entire business case out of, we are representing the right that is now being suppressed. Nobody was being suppressed. Who's suppressing the right wing?
Well, there was a little thing a few years back called cancel culture, which kind of swept the internet, which I think inspired a lot of fear in people. And that was a big driver of self-censorship also.
Well, it was not just self-censorship. I think it was weaponized, right? Yeah. It was like if you had a beef, like I remember, like whatever I've written about the Jews, like good or bad, I've written good or bad about like the Muslims in that conflict. Whatever I've written good or bad about the whites and no need for reparations or whatever, I've written and criticized the black position. Like, so I kind of cover all my tracks. But I remember for a period being like, okay, so the name of the game now is when somebody starts to troll you online, they're going to go through your feed. Oh, Iranians are the greatest at this. Iranians are like, 8 years ago, you liked this picture of Hassan Golaguluz or whatever, and they're like, you must be, and I'm like, you guys are just a bunch of morons. But so yes, if you start to weaponize that and you go through people's feeds and people's this and that, you know, you see this with hockey players when, yeah, there's like athletes in general. The guy, okay, this generation, everybody has a Twitter or a Facebook when they're like 10, 11. So yeah, I'm not surprised if a little pimple-nosed kid at 13 said something sexist, misogynist, racist. It's wrong. I don't defend it at all. But God knows what I was doing at 13. There's just no record of it, right? But we got into this kind of crazy mode where we started to weaponize these things against one another. So also when people talk about, is America at risk for civil war? The Civil War might be happening now, but it's not bullets. It's more words. It's more boycotts. You know, it's more like, hey, going up to, and again, to be fair, the idiots on the left that for a decade would go and try to cancel a teacher or an author because they said something that was right-wing, supposedly. Well, now the shoe's on the other foot, where all these professors that for a decade have been riding the woke train, they're kind of like on hit lists, which I don't condone again, but it's just, you know, an eye for an eye and we're all blind.
So in your view, is self-censorship more of a healthy filtering process in most cases, or is there a negativity associated with it that perhaps doesn't benefit society?
I mean, this is where I like to just speak the truth. I think the best advice I give people, and I've made this mistake, is like, let's just start with work and then we'll go to social. So there's often times when I want to tell somebody something and I go, how you say it and when you say it is more important than what you say. So as a result, oftentimes I'll write an email and I'll either just keep it in my drafts folder, read it the next day, or even more powerfully, I'll send it to myself. And then a few hours later, usually the next day, I'll read it. And I'm a decent writer. I'm pretty diplomatic, but not 9, but like 6 times out of 10, I'm like, yeah, delete. This is not necessary. But I got it off my chest. Like Freud, when you sleep, you kind of poop out the negative energy, you gather information, you process information, you sort information. So what I'm getting at is self-censorship is a good thing because 9 times out of 10, you're just going to make yourself look bad. You're just going to end up giving yourself anxiety. There's too many opinions. It's very rare for you to post something and, oh my God, world peace came as a result. You know, or, oh my God, you disagreed with the blacks asking for reparation. They're not asking for it. Or like the whites that are like, you will not replace us. They're no longer feeling like, come on, nobody cares, right? So my advice to people is not like, I'm just saying on a personal level, is you're better off just being proactively selective with what you say. I post a lot of nonsense on Twitter, X, in general, because I'm like, if I said this at the office, it would sound weird. It would be misinterpreted. So I get out the garbage. I go, get rid of the crazy. Don't keep it inside, right? But I do think ultimately it is, to quote Karl Marx, the OG, economic determinism. 99.9% of these decisions are driven by what is the impact to your wallet. Some people don't care. You could call that courage. You could call that stupidity. But my point is, correct yourself, because in the end, like, control yourself. Still say what you want, but be careful. Like that, remember there was like a marketing gal. She went to Africa, and as she got on the flight, this was pre-Wi-Fi, she said, "Oh, I'm going to Africa. Wish me luck and hope I don't get AIDS." She thought this was funny. This is not funny. This is not funny. It's super insensitive. Now, she thought this was hilarious, and people would retweet and hashtag this and great. No, she got canceled.
Yeah.
And rightfully. She was like a marketing person. So it's like, okay, like the company's like, we don't want to deal with this now. We don't want to offend a billion people. So my point is, most of the time, everything will boil down to business and the economics of it. If you say something, like politicians, they may not like what is happening in Dearborn, where there's the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day, or whatever. It's like live and let live. But even if they don't like it, they may not say anything because they want those votes.
Yeah.
So the same way that politicians ultimately care about votes and don't have principles when said and done, businesses are not there because they have principles or they have any conviction. They care about the bottom line. So I'm just saying, whatever you're going to say, take the next 2 steps to be like, what is the ripple effects of this? And WatchMojo, I don't care by and large, but most employers don't want your full self. They don't want to deal with it. You know, they're like, come to work, shut up, do your job, leave everybody else alone. Like, that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
And so censorship and what you say is just part of that bigger thing now. And it does always boil down to the bottom line, whether people like to admit it or not.
Isn't there a fine line though between self-censoring and dishonesty? Like where does that line? Where is that line? And
well, this I'll give you a very good example. A lot of people, rightfully meaning to observe, not that they're right, because I need to wrap my head around it myself. They're like, TikTok was never about China. It was more that now Oracle, Larry Ellison. I'm an atheist. I think both sides are nut jobs, frankly. But they're like, he's a staunch Zionist. This was to censor the pro-Palestinian voices on TikTok. So I don't know enough to, like, I need to educate myself. But I'm just saying, let's say I held that position, which purposely is touchy. Some people get around, like, I talk about everything. There's a difference if I believe that to say, nope, don't see anything. China, big bad. Larry, okay, nice guy. I like Oracle. I own shares, which I don't actually. That is just not controlling, like controlling yourself. Like just having agency of what do I say? How is this going to be interpreted? Dishonesty is me believing that and saying China is the greatest threat in the history of Americans, and no problem with Larry Ellison because, oh, I want to get a free Paramount Plus account now that he owns Paramount through his son, right? So there is a difference, to be fair, between dishonesty and not saying everything that comes through your mind. I do think those are very different. Right. When I was being sued by Fox, yeah, there was a part of me that wanted to say Rupert Murdoch is a cunt, let's say. Not that he is. Not that I felt that way. That's another word on the list. But I was like, well, don't attack Fox. Because Fox is going along with the lawsuit that IGN, whom they bought, initiated. So I was attacking IGN. I called the Aspen guys a bunch of cucumbers and zucchinis just to ridicule them, just to make it awkward for them, because that was the tactics I needed to take on Goliath, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I controlled myself by not going and calling the Murdochs a bunch of genocidal pigs, because I was like, well, I don't want to draw their ire. I want them eventually to tap the IGN guys and say, enough's enough. took a strike. You didn't kill him. He's now attacking you. We're going to end this, right? So is that dishonesty? No, it was a tactic. I wasn't there saying Rupert Murdoch is the greatest thing for democracy. He's probably not. But I wasn't going to be dishonest about things either.
Where do we go from here? Is the internet it continues to evolve? We're not going to see the last of the censorship issue, but how is it going to transform as things continue to progress?
Well, great. I actually think that, AI is both underestimated and over boogeyman. But I do think, though, that we are about to enter something that mere mortals, even freaking Sam Altman, even Elon Musk does not understand, right? Because they don't know the tools that they built. Like YouTube, the guys that programmed YouTube did not know where YouTube would be. If they did, they would still be running it. They didn't leave because they were wealthy. They left because they didn't know what they were doing. Like those guys were geniuses, the three guys. They were mainly lucky and good timing. They didn't know. So most people don't know. Anybody that says they do is crazy. But I will say that with AI, the amount of so-called, like, not fake news in that sense, but just false content, fake content, where all of a sudden, like everything I see Trump say now, I'm like, this has to be AI. This can't be real. But then he said it. He's actually sitting there next to the Turkey guy. He's like, this guy's a dictator. He's like, this guy Turkey has wanted to take over Syria for thousands of years, even though Turkey as a nation is not 1,000 years old. But let's set that aside. He'll say batshit crazy stuff. And I'm like, that's AI. He would not say that in front of it. But so my point is, I think the bigger issue now is, if somebody does an AI of Ash going out there and saying, the whites are evil and the Jews are this and the Muslims are that, we didn't even talk about defamation, and we could land it on this if you want. But defamation is another form of censorship, whether you like it or not. It's the threat of punishment for something you said. And as much as in America, they're like, the truth is an absolute defense. Okay, to a large extent in America, but like in our jurisdiction, I could say something, man, I really want to go there, but I won't. Self-control. I had a experience where somebody kind of did something that was, we'll just say, unethical. If it was criminal, that's up to the courts to decide.
Okay.
Well, when I reached out to them, I had, like, they told me, F off, we could do whatever we want. So I said, okay, well, fine, I'll mention this publicly and just be like cautionary tale. And I was like going to let it go. I wasn't going to sue them, but I was going to move on and just write an article the way I do and maybe not even mention them. They threatened me for defamation. Now, those are tons of stories, people that in the industry, the few people that knew were like, this person is a cheater. Why would you be surprised that they're a thief or whatever? I was like, don't tell me this. Don't give me that temptation, because I didn't want to say anything. But basically, they used the courts to threaten me to not speak the truth. Because in Quebec, I could just say I don't like somebody's hair, and Quebec is such a snowflake society that if you literally say even the truth, but it's detrimental to somebody's reputation. Now, the damages are not staggering. The damages could be tens of thousands versus millions. But what I'm getting at is I was effectively silenced to point to an injustice, like, so to speak, in the industry. But I also was like, okay, whatever, like, life goes on, not a big deal. But so to bring it all together, I don't think 99.9% of the cases where people go, freedom of speech, First Amendment, it's not that. It's not. But yes, there is censorship, self-censorship, organizational censorship. There's discipline. There's third-party threats of defamation. And you know what? I live by the adage, my liberty ends where my neighbor's liberty starts. Mm-hmm. So if I go out there and I say stuff and it is hurtful and harmful, I also could just kind of be like, what is the upside of saying this? If it means that much more to somebody else than it means to me, let it go. Life's very long. But that's also the difference between successful people and people that just whine and complain and don't get anything done in life because they're more keyboard warriors.
There you go. I think that's a great note to end it off with, Ash. Thanks for your time, as always.
How many of those 7 words did we drop today? That's just
quite a few of them, I think.
Yeah.
But well, that's fine.
It's a show and tell today.
No one is going to censor this podcast. Anyway.
Oh, wait.
All right.
That's our board of directors.
Thanks everybody for watching. There were some interesting comments there, so thank you for those who engaged, and drop a comment with some suggestions for what we should tackle in the next Inside podcast episode, because the floodgates are open. We can do pretty much anything now. So let us know what you want to hear us talk about for 45 minutes to an hour
No censorship.
More censorship. Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
All right. Cheers.